big howdy from Austin, Texas. This week, Austin has been front and center in the world of government purchasing. Right now, Austin is hosting NIGP Forum 2019, a wonderful annual event in which I was fortunate to attend this week, headed over to the convention center. Many exciting and interesting things going on. Bill Colhane from our TBBT studios. Rick Jennings is hanging out. Happy back to school for many of you. I know our friend Dr. Rodney Rohde, who was on last episode discussing public health topics. Dr. R is back in front of his students down at Texas State. And Rick, it's been a while for you, but do you miss the days of class, studying, test, papers, all that fun stuff?
I absolutely do miss it from time to time. I mean, I had a really good time in college learning a whole lot, and it was really, I don't know, I think it's in my blood to be part of academia. So yeah, I do miss it a little bit, but also glad to be kind of putting everything I learned to use here so I can enjoy that as well.
This is our 5th season of the show, and we often talk about the quality of guests we have on the Big Bit Theory. It's not bragging, it's a fact. Our longtime listeners know that we usually do a tremendous job in lining up our guests. In fact, in this episode, our friend Denitra Gober and the staff in Atlanta helped arrange a visit with Mr. Gary Brantley, Atlanta's CIO, Chief Information Officer. A couple of episodes back, we had an excellent conversation. Again, many of you remember, Dr. Diana Burley from George Washington University and I3P, and really focused on cybersecurity-related matters with Diana. Mr. Brantley is going to cover a multitude of other important areas in the world of IT. Rick, this morning, speaking of IT, you mentioned you glanced in BidPrime's database, and yes, it's true, the public sector across the U.S. that are investing in IT.
Absolutely. So looking at the BidPrime database and going over categorizations and such, I just kind of took a look as for like generic IT versus everything that it really encapsulates. And what is really neat is that if you look for just like information technology, just very like bare bones, you get, I don't know, maybe about anywhere between like 60 and 70 that would be active, or just looking for that as a term. But if you expand out to the entire category of everything it encapsulates, you'll get about tenfold of that as results, because there's so much more that goes into just IT as its own idea. Like, do you work with any particular sectors, maybe particular softwares, programming languages, and there is so much that goes into it. It's going to be really interesting to see a few new ideas in this field. I'd really like to hear it myself.
Good job, Rick. Well, everybody is ready to hear from Mr. Brantley. Gary Brantley has, let's call it what it is, an impressive resume. He's recognized as really a shining star in the world of technology. He has 20 years of experience in the tech sector, with 17 of those years serving in leadership positions. He's accountable for a lot. He's accountable for information technology services for all 25 of Atlanta's various departments. Before Atlanta, Gary was the CIO for one of the largest school districts in the state of Georgia. You ask about recognitions. Gary was named as one of the top 30 technologists, transformers, and trailblazers by the Center for Digital Education back in 2015, Computer World's premier top 100 CIO in the nation, and was a finalist for the 2018 Georgia CIO Leadership Association CIO of the Year Award. Yeah, again, impressive stuff. So with no further ado, here's my visit with Atlanta's CIO, Mr. Gary Brantley.
Mr. Brantley, our audience over the years, I mention it from time to time. I spent 3 years at Clemson University. I worked at Clemson back in the late 80s, and I was fortunate to go over to Atlanta a number of times, and I've watched the city of Atlanta grow over the years. I make it to Georgia State University about once or twice every year over the past 5 or 6 years, and it's amazing to me to watch how the city of Atlanta has grown. How are things there in Atlanta?
Things are going well. We have a lot of growth taking place here. We have a lot of industries, interested in being a part and doing things in the city of Atlanta. The film industry, we're growing from a tech perspective with startups. And so, I guess being tabbed as, the kind of Silicon Valley of the Southeast. And so, things are really going well here. We're thriving as a city, and we're growing day by day.
It's an amazing place. It is an incredible city, beautiful city, and I always enjoy myself. So, Mr. Brantley, coming up in October, you're going to be speaking at Cyber Talks 2019, talking about ransomware defense. And our listeners, many in our audience, remember the conversation I had with Dr. Diana Burley from GW and I3P. I guess it was a couple of episodes ago, and we talked about cybersecurity, and everybody knows how important cybersecurity is. A point of clarification, you weren't working for the city of Atlanta at the time, but what are a few lessons learned from the ransomware attack on Atlanta that occurred not that long ago?
So as you know, when you have the ransomware attacks, they come in two phases, right? So what you have is, once it happens, you have phase one, which is getting everything back up and operational. But then you have a second phase, which takes a really long time and one that I'm extremely involved in, which is tying security around what you brought back up. And so, some of the big lessons learned, of course, there are certain things around cybersecurity that you want to keep confidential. But as we were recovering through this process, some of the things we learned is that disaster recovery and business continuity is extremely important. And it's so important that it needs to be practiced constantly so that when things start to happen, you're not looking at the playbook on day one. That's one of the biggest mistakes you can make. And so those are our lessons learned. Had the city, no one becomes well versed in cyber attacks because a lot of times you don't expect them to happen. And over the last few months, they've been happening a lot more with government agencies that really at a rapid pace. And what we're trying to focus on is how quickly now we can recover. You want to put the hard things in place. You want to have a segmented network. You want to make sure your patching is strong. The fundamentals of what you need to have in place for security needs to be in place. But more importantly, the good organizations who have become really good at cyber defense focus on how quickly you can identify that there's something going on and how quickly you can isolate it and move into your recovery stage. And so those are areas that we are working on here in the city of Atlanta and some of the biggest lessons learned. I also think, to add to what I said earlier, the saying goes, practice makes perfect, and you really have to simulate these types of events happening. And that's one of the things that we learned. We actually put that practice into place extremely early during the Super Bowl. So we had a chance to really test some of the things that we had learned through this process by doing major tabletop exercises with some of the biggest corporations, not only in Atlanta, but the United States. They were all a part of this effort to really curb any event happening during that particular time with the city of Atlanta. And that was both federal, state, local individuals, but also private corporations were extremely involved in that. We worked as one team and actually went through scenarios of what would happen and if it happened, what would we do? And going through those types of exercises provides an extreme amount of value. So when they do happen and you're nervous, most people don't know who you call. Who do you call first? You call Homeland Security first, or you call the FBI first? No, you really get into really knowing the steps in order in which you get to handle chaos. And that's where, I think those are some of the big lessons, not necessarily the granular technical stuff that most people think. So
Yeah, and many of the things you pointed out is I'm not sitting here with a checklist, Mr. Brantley, but as I listened to you cover that, I was echoing back that many of the things that you bring up are exactly what Diana Burley talked about a couple of months ago. So what that tells me as somebody on the periphery, on the outside, is that this is something that's being communicated, or as you just pointed out, this is something that's being practiced. And I know in doing background on you and our research staff that you're a champion of collaboration. So hearing you talk, it sounds like that's exactly how you're approaching the issue. And you're right. We did research getting ready to speak with Dr. Burley a couple of months ago, and ransomware attacks are certainly on the rise. And it isn't just Atlanta. It isn't just Baltimore. It isn't just the port of San Diego. It is small town USA that needs to be aware as well. Now, I used the word champion a moment ago, and Gary, you've been a champion for governments leveraging tech and delivering services to citizens. For example, I know addressing crime, traffic concerns. Atlanta's like most major cities, like Austin, Texas, right here, and also delivering fiber services. I've heard you seen how you've been talking about leveraging tech. So what are some of the ways in which Atlanta is using the power of technology?
Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure, especially in my position, you want to make sure that you're aligned with what the mayor's priorities and administration. You want to make sure you're aligned with what they are. And in most cases, which is the case with, our mayor for the city of Atlanta, she is extremely focused on bettering lives for citizens and residents. She's extremely focused on equity. She's extremely focused on reducing crime and crime prevention. And so when you look at those areas, not to include homelessness, when you look at those areas, you really want to try to use your ability to wrap technology services around those types of things. And so my job is to take that approach to say, hey, these are the issues facing our citizens and community, and how can we use technology to help alleviate some of those? And so one thing that we're real focused on, of course, Atlanta is a big, smart city. And so, we have a lot of projects that are citizen-facing projects that are going on. And we've been able to leverage technology. And I'll just give you an example from the water perspective. We use drones to do our surveys, to get to, of our water. And we use those drones to get to areas that we might not be able to get to by foot. And so we're really trying to advance our whole water treatment plan and also how we interface with citizens as it relates to water meter reading, and also, as it relates to the customer service portion of it. That includes billing, voice, whether it's voice or email communication or digital communication as it relates to providing customer service for those individuals. And so then I'll skip one over and go to something that everybody's very interested in, which is public safety. And so
Sure.
we made a lot of gains around that area. Atlanta has shot spotter technology across the city in certain areas, especially areas that we feel have, are riddled with a lot of crime. And so, we use technology like that to really be able to get to the scene a lot quicker, to really be able to use analytics from the predictive side of it to try to predict crime as well, to see from the percentage side of things where crime is most likely to happen. But you also have license plate readers and camera integration. We have several partnerships right now with our citizens that we're able to use cameras to tie into the police department here, to our video integration center. A citizen can opt into that program, which will give our police force eyes on what's going on in their neighborhood. And that's really picked up. It actually has helped reduce crime. And I'm sure, many cities are doing that as well. It's not just the city of Atlanta. And I do believe that over the years, we were able we had a head start in some of those areas, and so we've been doing it for quite some time. Also, if you really paid attention, or if you've been to Atlanta, you know there's issues around traffic. And so,
yes, I can. I mentioned I go to Georgia State about at least once a year, various events, and yeah, when you land at the airport and you try to make your way up to downtown, it can be tough.
Yeah, so you have technology in place that we have in place that allows for the street lights to be changed to green by our EMS personnel, and working on that for our police personnel, which means they'll have control of traffic lights and flow, which will help as they're in pursuit in certain cases or needing to get to certain areas. Having that technology makes it safe for not only our public safety personnel, but also for the citizens that are out in those streets and areas trying to get to where they're trying to get. And so we're really excited about that type of technology, and in the near future, looking at putting that on public transportation routes. And so the advantage to that is if you ride public transportation, buses, et cetera, things like that you don't get stopped at a light. And so, those things, it may not necessarily help citizens right away. It may not help alleviate traffic congestion, but what it does do is it provides another safety mechanism while they're on the road, get caught up in that. And so that would be another area. We also are focused on things that we can do for the homeless. We're working, I can't really talk about it right now, but we're working on we'll have some really cool announcements coming out in the next 30 days around that. And also we'll have some really cool announcements coming out about public Wi-Fi, free public Wi-Fi in a lot of our areas. So, and programs to help assist, specifically technology programs to help assist those who are in need or need jobs. The mayor's real big on those types of programs. She really has a heart for helping citizens. So we've begun to partner with some of the largest corporations that sit here in Atlanta to really help provide those services to citizens. So that is that component too. We want to work on skills. We want to work on, one thing I left out is data. It's an expectation. I had a citizen walk up to me and say, I'm going to expect to know certain things about my community from a data perspective, and I'm going to expect you all to be able to provide those. And so we're getting to this day and age, and this is really good because we're one of the cities that has 5G, and we have all of these devices that are, on the edge. And so we have citizens who want to know kind of what we know from a public safety perspective, from a traffic perspective. They want information around where they live. And so we're getting to that point where we're going to need to provide that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Expectations have gone up, and what an incredible list that you just went through. Again, it's exciting for me on this side, seeing the way the city of Atlanta is using technology, because you're right, Gary. As I look around and I'm watching across the U.S., like I'm sure you are as well, but you see all of the exciting things being requested, implemented, and taken advantage of. When you as a leader are with your teams, the mayor, whomever, and you're considering implementing software and or hardware solutions, how do you, the city of Atlanta, balance the old fast, cheap, or good pictu trade-off?
Well, of course, this is government, and
sure.
The perception out there is that everything is slow anyway, right? They move a lot slower than the private sector. And so one of the things that I've talked about with my staff here is how important pace is. I've worked in government for a little bit, and so I understand that pace is everything for me. And so when I'm looking at solutions, and this is across the board, when I'm looking at solutions, when I'm trying to solve problems, the first thing I'm looking at, and it may not be the right thing to do in some cases, but I'm really looking at how quickly we can get from point A to B. I then look at how quickly we can get from point A to B cost effectively. And so cheap isn't always good. I know in certain cases we want to get the best value for what it is that we're purchasing, but in a lot of cases you still have to balance quality. And so
Sure.
You told me to pick two. I'm going to add to your question and talk about balancing the fast with good, cheap, and good quality. And so those are areas that from a strategy perspective, you have to really sit down and think about. We have here something that's called 5-5-5. And it's what can we get done in 5 days? What can we get done in 5 weeks? And what can we get done in 5 months? And so when you first look at this, you would say, there's probably not much I can get in 5 days, get done in 5 days.
Right. We're talking the city of Atlanta. Yeah, I imagine 5 days would be tough.
Right. But when you actually sit down and thoughtfully go through this collectively as a team, you can come up with a major list of things that you could be extremely productive in the next 5 days. And so we sat down and really said go. And so we looked at what we could do fast and what would take time to do. And so the things that, when you say how do you balance fast and good, well, what we did was say, hey, we can go fast in these areas. We can go, and I'll give you an example. We can go fast in research. We can go fast from a communication perspective. All the things that we can control internally, we need to be very good at. We need to be good at what we're supposed to be good at. And so we look at those areas, and then we say, hey, from a strategy perspective, what's going to take a little longer? And that sometimes means even taking it through citizen comment sections. That's even taking it through, city council. That's taking it through procurement. You look at all these different areas that you have to move through in order to really get something done. And so you balance those out as you put your strategy at the forefront of going fast, but also balancing that with good quality while still being cost effective. That's where I would leave it at that. And in some cases, I don't know if you can really have a trade-off.
Got it. Well said, Mr. Brantley. And obviously, anybody who's listened to the start of our conversation here understands, and the people in Atlanta already know that you've hit the ground running. You're not a guy, obviously, who's sitting around waiting for things to happen. You're helping to make things happen there in Atlanta. You kind of went over your strategy for mapping out projects, identifying what needs to be done. But I'm going to put you on the spot here. Okay. You've got to limit it to 3. If somebody limited you to 3, what are your 3 goals, your 3 main objectives over the next 12 months? And I understand you may be restricted on exactly how much detail you can necessarily give, but looking at the calendar the next year, what's going to happen in Atlanta under your purview?
Yeah, so most importantly, the first thing I needed to focus on in getting inside of the city was strengthening the core of the city. And that's operationally, there were some things that needed to be worked on. There was some stabilization that needed to take place. There were some development and implementation of standards, processes, and procedures that needed to happen. And so, and also some improvement or some evaluation around skill set and talent was also at the forefront of it. So those were areas we really wanted to focus on our delivery of reliable, cost-effective, and secure core IT services. That is one area. The second area we needed to focus on was application rationalization. And so, we looked at this from a couple of angles. What do we need to retire? What do we need to invest in? And where do we need to go from a modernization perspective as it relates to the city of Atlanta? So we were looking, really going back to the first point I made, to retire redundant applications. What could be retired right now? The city had an enormous several hundred applications, and so we really wanted to, look at that to see where we could be caught, where we could find some efficiencies, where we could save, and where we could really move to more of an enterprise model. And so those are areas that we worked on. I would say third, and we're still going through that process now, of course. But third,
Sure.
we wanted to be able to innovate and accelerate at the same time. So we still wanted to have pockets of innovation. We wanted to, and I know we'll get into this later. We wanted to focus on enhancing the end user experience to deliver efficient and timely and innovative IT services. And that goes to, which we'll talk, I just said it, but we'll talk about it later, optimizing cloud utilization and deployment, developing a cloud strategy, and support. Of course, I talked about smart city earlier, but really support some of the smart city investments and also tie into strategy with that, which also lends to, and I haven't talked about this yet, but our ability to collaborate with other C-suite executives across the city that have a mutual interest and quite honestly, a civic responsibility to be involved to help the city move forward. And so that's why I have this CIO advisory council on behalf of the mayor that really, is really focused on the citizen side of things and is really tied into the innovation and the acceleration of it. And so everything that they are looking at has to do with improving outcomes for citizens. I have several, you can look at it online, but CIOs from companies like Equifax, Delta, they are all, involved, and of course, big players here in the city of Atlanta. So it's really important that we take a collaborative effort to get this done.
There's that word again, collaboration, and Gary, it's a word that's become associated with what you're doing there in Atlanta. I heard you tease a moment ago. You mentioned cloud, and cloud is something that we've talked about a lot on the show over the years, not necessarily here in season 5. What's the city of Atlanta doing with cloud?
And that's a good question. We have, since the cyber attack, we have increased, our percentage of cloud-based services drastically. But as you know, there's still that balance you have to have. So we have sort of a hybrid approach as it relates to, cloud services and also what we have on-prem. And so, yes, we still have a decent sized footprint on premise here, but what we're looking at is taking steps day by day to move solutions to the cloud where it makes sense. Where it's cost effective. And so we have some areas that we just don't have the expertise in-house to handle. And so, moving that, as you well know, to the cloud provides better options as it relates to skill sets for certain applications and solutions. And so we're looking at that. So we're balancing our move to cloud, using cost, but also factoring in the skill sets that we have. And we have a little formula. We look at roadmaps, even in purchasing new solutions. We're looking at cloud-based roadmaps and where will you be in the next 5-6 years. A good example of us going to the cloud is our financial system, our ERP, Oracle. We just went live in January, completely live on everything. One of the first major government cities to go completely cloud-based on their financial systems. And so it's provided us, from a security perspective with tools, but also, individuals who can manage certain things that we just couldn't do in-house. So that's one example of really moving from, the city moving from an on-prem solution to cloud-based, and that was a major lift to get that done.
A lot going on in Atlanta. It sounds like Mayor Bottoms and the city of Atlanta are keeping you busy, Mr. Brantley, and I understand you have a meeting coming up, so I do want to allow you to exit stage left, so to speak. But before we let you go, Cyber Scoop announced, and I already touched on it, that coming up on October 24th in our nation's capital in D.C., you're going to be giving a talk at Cyber Talks 2019. Is there anything else coming up on your calendar and or anything else that you have available that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, of course, a lot of these things they pop up at the last minute. But I do know that I'll be back in D.C. at City Lab in a few weeks, to really have some discussion around cyber as well and some of the things that we're doing in the city of Atlanta. And also here we have the Smart City first. What they're saying is the first Smart City conference of this magnitude will be here in Atlanta next month. It's a Smart City Expo. It will be the first one, and so we'll be here, and also we'll be back in November in Barcelona to really take a look at what other cities are doing at their big Smart City conference, to really look at what other cities are doing, not only in the U.S. but across the world, to really start to take some best practices from that. And here shortly, on a personal note, I wrote a book that will be coming out in the next few. You said drop personal, so I'll just drop that. Organizational transformation, and so that'll be coming out shortly. And it just really talks about how you walk into organizations, and the steps that you can generally take in order to effectively change them around or transform them.
Well, what you walked into, Mr. Brantley, and how you're approaching it, I would say that you're an authority on that subject.
Yes. This is probably the second or third organization that I've walked into where we've really focused on transformation. So I've got some practice.
Yeah, you certainly do. Well, again, Mr. Brantley, on behalf of our entire audience and everybody here at the Big Bit Theory, appreciate you spending some time with us. As we can assist you and your staff in getting information out, whatever we can do in our own little way, please be sure to have your folks pass along to us, and we'll be more than happy to share the information with our audience. I will be in Atlanta and Statesboro, Georgia, by the way, but I will be making a visit to the Peach State in December, and who knows, maybe our paths will cross.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for highlighting the city of Atlanta and a lot of the great work that's going on here with our mayor, the Honorable Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Thank you to Gary Brantley. A lot going on in Atlanta, one of my favorite cities. It seems like I make at least one trip to Georgia State University there in downtown Atlanta. There's a lot going on in the world of IT throughout the public sector, large and small, throughout the United States. Well, that's going to do it. No crazy bid in this episode. Promise to have your crazy bid in the upcoming episode of this show. We so much appreciate you sharing, downloading, following the Big Bit Theory on social media. You can send us an email. If there's something you want to hear about, something you want us to talk about, send me an email at bcolhane@bidprime.com. You can follow us on Twitter at The Big Bit Theory. My personalized Twitter is contract_hunter. And yes, we're on Facebook as well. Powered by Bid Prime for Kevin Henderson and Rick Jennings. Those guys are counting down the days till we get below 100 degrees here in Austin. It can't come soon enough. Many, many thanks again to Gary Brantley, Atlanta's CIO. This is Bill Colhane. Until next time, go Gunners, Barracudas, Tigers, Bobcats, and Cubs. And we wish you all the best in growing your business.
Powered by Bid Prime, we thank you for tuning in to the Big Bit Theory. From Austin, Texas, the show is produced by Bill Colhane and Jim Ward. Producer and engineer is Rick Jennings.
Distribution, research, and production assistance by Lauren Jones and Kevin Henderson. You can find other episodes of The Big Bid Theory on platforms to include iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, and Google Play.
So much fun.